Hey everybody, today is part 3 of our Roman Empire lecture. So I'm going to go put part 1 and 2. It should pop up over there if I remember to do it. Hopefully I will. And I hope we enjoy starting to look at some of the different emperors of Rome. We're going to go from Tiberius to some military anarchy because we have some wild times ahead of us. Please press that like, subscribe button, help out the channel. And let's move on to the Roman emperors. Okay, so like I said, we are going to be going all the way from essentially 14 AD or CE, if you want to be politically correct, going to 284 AD. And so we're going to touch on our Claudian emperors quite a bit. We are going to talk about our 5 good emperors. We're not going to say much about the Flavians, and we're just going to have things here and there, smatterings going on. So let's get started. So Tiberius, the successor to Octavian. Now, legend says he wasn't meant to be emperor, nor did he particularly want the job to be emperor. They wanted Germanicus. Germanicus was going to be the great emperor. Everybody in Rome loved Germanicus. He was the favorite. He was a war hero. He had a great personality, good looking. But then he mysteriously dies, probably from poison. But with the histories, it's always poison or something mysterious. And sometimes people did just die. So we don't know for certain. So Tiberius winds up taking power, never wanting it, and the people didn't love Tiberius. He was pretty cheap with. He didn't spend money on public games. He wound up going and being trained for the role. Octavian wound up giving him some of the roles that he once held and trading power off. So it was a pretty smooth transition to power. Tiberius was typically a good general. And he grew more and more tired of ruling. He eventually, semi-retires in his own personal pleasure island, where there's some pretty creepy, scary, weird things that we are not going to talk about here going on with that. And he goes and lets other people rule Rome. In fact, this winds up being pretty bad because one of the people he goes and has rule in his stead winds up starting prescriptions again. Remember when Sulla did that, where they say, "Oh, you are an enemy of Rome, Ella, and therefore you need to be killed on sight, and then all your property and things stolen." So those prescriptions start, there's chaos, and eventually this is found out, it's put an end to. But Tiberius makes one more mistake. He goes and has Caligula be his successor. Now, the story goes then Caligula will promptly suffocate him with a pillow. Once again, though, did it happen? Did it not happen? Tiberius was old. Maybe it was natural causes. But we know Caligula is named heir, and Tiberius is killed. So let's get to Caligula. He looks like such a nice guy, doesn't he? It's because the statue was in a fire. That's why it's dark like that. But boy, is that creepy with like the white looking eyes and then just the dark tone of everything and the look on his face. Woo! I guess having your nose bash it makes you look more evil too, a little Voldemort-y. Okay. Anyways, Caligula, that's not his name. Caligula means little boots. It was the title given to him because he was Germanicus' son. See, Germanicus, like I had mentioned in the last slide, is very popular, well loved. And so people naturally loved the idea of his son becoming the next Roman emperor. So little boots here, cute. He was called that because he was dressed up in a little tiny Roman legion uniform as he went with his father on military campaign. And everyone was so excited when he took over from Tiberius. He said, "Oh, this is the heir of Germanicus. This is going to be fantastic." And they're excited. But then he gets very, very sick, like almost dies sick. And senators are all upset. And they say, "Oh, if only it was me that was dying instead of Caligula." Well, Caligula gets better. Miraculously, the gods heal him, perhaps. I don't know. But then he goes to some of those senators and says, "Well, we don't want Jupiter to, renege on his promise. You said you wish it was you that was dying instead of me, and now I'm okay, so I guess you know what you need to do. He thought he was a god. Now, part of this was, Augustus was deified after his death. Tiberius was deified after his death, meaning considered one of the Roman pantheon, one of the gods. He thought he was a god while he was alive. He falls in love with his sister, ew, and then he forces her to marry him. She is pregnant with child. He thinks the child is going to kill him, so he kicks her to death, cuts the baby out. It's scary, it's sad. He puts his horse in the Senate. He goes and says, I think my horse could do a better job than you. And then sure enough, one day he brings his horse to the Senate and manage those, Augustan senators going, and then right next to them, there's a neighing horse. And Caligula, he was wild. He killed people. He was unpredictable. Spent tons of money on games. So at first, people liked him, and then they realized how crazy he was. And he winds up being murdered at a sporting event. He goes and they can't take him anymore. In fact, a lot of his family were killed, all except Uncle Claudius. The Roman people didn't know much about Claudius. You see, Claudius was kept secret from the people because Claudius, he limped. He had something wrong with his legs, so he didn't walk properly. He was partially deaf, so he couldn't hear, and he would stutter when he got emotional. So his family thought of him as a fool because of these things, which is actually really, really sad because he was very, very smart. When he was shunned, he would read books. He was found hiding behind a sheet when the murders of the ruling family happened, and the Praetorian Guard, the people sworn to protect the emperor, who then killed the emperor and was killing his family, they see him and they think, "Oh, we can control dumb old Claudius," and they pronounce him emperor there, kind of like as a joke, kind of make him like a figurehead puppet. But the thing is, he actually winds up ruling pretty well. Claudius has a sad story for his personal life. He winds up always looking for love, finally gets married to someone who keeps him, and then he has a son under a different wife, Hero, and his current wife has a son named Nero from another marriage. And after he goes and puts Nero as the co-heir to the throne, he and Hero will wind up being killed. I forgot a great story about Caligula. Caligula, being Germanicus' son, wanted to be, a general like him. So Caligula, I'm just going to back up, winds up sending an expedition to conquer Britain. Julius Caesar had sent some ships over and some men, and was like, "Oh man, the people in the island of Britain, they're crazy, they're wild." So he takes them to the coast of Gaul, which we know is France today, the Normandy region, and he has his men collect seashells. He convinces some people, he pays them to do a fake battle where he takes some of them back as slaves to go have a parade about his victory, because that's what you did after you won a battle. You had a big parade with all of the loot and riches and slaves you took. So he goes, and Caligula does that. Well, Claudius, kind of showing that he's the real deal, he actually sends a real military expedition and conquers much of Britain. So we see just the juxtaposition, the person that the people loved and wanted Caligula to wind up being terrible and a joke, whereas Claudius, the person that was mocked and scorned, wound up actually becoming a fairly competent ruler. He's probably my favorite of the Julio-Claudian emperors. Good old underdog story. Anyways, like I said, he makes Nero his heir, and then is murdered, and then eventually his son Hero is murdered. So we get to Nero. Nero is known for two things: extravagance and executions. Maybe not what you want to be known for, perhaps. So Nero, he thought of himself as the greatest actor the world had ever seen. So he would put on lots of plays. And the play calls for a death scene, something tragic to break the heart. The actor would be killed. They'd go on incredibly long. Perhaps you go, and before going to the play, and the senators and rich people, famous people, they would be invited to this. You drink a lot of water or anything like that. You think about the movie theaters, those big 64 ounce drinks. You're drinking that, and you really have to go to the bathroom. So you're doing your pee dance. You really got to go, and you get up in the middle of the show, and Nero notices. I mean, you come back, of course, but after the show, a Praetorian guard may come up to you, take you away, and you might never come back. Maybe you're talking with someone and say, "Oh, I didn't like it." Nero hears about it. You may die. You go and don't show up when invited. You might be executed there too. It was pretty serious, life and death. He murders, like I said, he murders Hero, his half brother. He murders his mother, who, was one of those moms who gave him a lot of advice, kind of told him what to do, and he got tired of that. And he also murders his wife. Not a great guy. Now, this probably isn't true. The legend says he burned down the city of Rome himself and then played a fiddle during the whole time. Well, fiddles weren't invented yet, the violin. So some other people say he was playing the lyre while he goes into. There are numerous stories saying that he actively helped try to put out the fire. So he probably didn't start the fire. This is more of a story talking about how crazy and terrible he was. But what he does after still isn't very good. He says it was that new religion, those Christians, that started the fire and actually begins the persecution of Christians, things like throwing them to the lions and things like that. So he begins the persecution of Christians. And then what he does too with the area that was destroyed also is pretty not good. There were homes of many of the less fortunate, and instead he builds a giant palace in its place instead of rebuilding their homes. So after he dies, of course, this palace will be buried and filled in because they hated him so much. And after Nero dies, Rome goes into a civil war, which is eventually won by a man named Vespasian, who is going to build the Colosseum. So we're going to skip a couple emperors and get to the time of the 5 good emperors. All right. I know we're moving a lot. We could spend a lot of time through a lot of these people. There are a lot of great stories. I highly recommend, what is it? The History of Rome by Mike Duncan. It's a great podcast talking about lots of great stuff. Anyways, so what happens is after Nero is done, and after we have a period where the army gets to pick a lot of the emperors, we're going to have a time where the Senate does. So we have between 96 and 180. We have this really great system where the emperor is going to be picked by the Senate. And then that person is going to pick a senator, not a son, that is considered to be a worthy successor, someone who is going to be the best person for the job. And so we have almost 100 years where Rome is going to be fantastic because we are picking based on merit. We're picking who would be the very best of this. Well, let's get to Nerva. Nerva, he was older. That's why the Romans actually picked him, because they're like, if he winds up being crazy, turning evil or bad, he'll die soon because he's old. So he's elected emperor by the Senate. And he goes, like I said, he starts this idea where immediately he starts picking who will be the best man for his successor and training them. One of the things he does is previous emperors had taken a lot of land from people, and then he goes and gives it back. Also, he goes and destroys a lot of records, which is kind of sad from the historical point of view. But he tries to reset some of the terrible things that had been done prior to him. We now get to Trajan. Trajan's pretty interesting because he's the first non-Italian emperor. He was Spanish. We see kind of finally Rome showing that it didn't matter where in Rome, just that you were a Roman citizen. And he's actually going to conquer additional land, and Rome will be the largest it ever will be under Emperor Trajan, even conquering parts of Mesopotamia. And he constantly wrote to the Senate when he was on military campaign. He would go and ask for Senate approval on things. Isn't that amazing? Going and kind of having Rome almost go back to how it was with the consuls, except that the consul was for life. He also was very popular because he made Rome very wealthy. He's going to spend tons of money on building infrastructure, aqueducts, people have water, public baths, lots of things. And we have Trajan's column today, which we're going to see right here, which is he's buried under. So we have Trajan's column right here, just showing some of the things that Trajan had done. He was a great emperor. Then we get to Hadrian, who is considered one of the greatest emperors of Rome. If you remember, you labeled his wall because you see they never conquered all of the island of Britain. The north, the Picts and the Scots, they were just too wild for them. So they just said, you know what, we're building a wall to keep them out and us in. One of the great things he does is he makes the laws the same throughout the empire to make sure it's not confusing. So if you were in Egypt, or in Hispania, Spain, or Gaul, or Italia, that it was the same. He made laws to protect women. He organized the army in a way that you defended where you're from. He thought people would be more motivated to protect their friends, their family, their homeland, rather than some random spots. So he reorganizes where they are in the legions, and like I said, he built Hadrian's Wall, which we see some of the remnants of today. We also have the Pantheon being built by Hadrian, a great religious structure. There we go. Okay, Antonius Pius. He was considered just and honest. He had what was called the years of tranquility, mostly because after him, the poop was going to start hitting the fan. We're going to, see that his end is kind of the end of the Pax Romana. We're going to start having some invasions from Germanic groups. We're going to start having plagues. But he is not the last of our 5 good emperors. No, we have Marcus Aurelius. Now, I want you to know he's considered the last of the good emperors, and it's 180 AD, and we have till 476 before Western Rome falls. We're going to have 300 years where, on average, the emperors were less than good. He's said to cut out dishonesty from the government. He built many things, aqueducts, bridges, and he's said to care about the people like his own. But part of the problem is we're going to have tons of people dying during this time. It's not going to be a great time to live in Rome. He's going to do his best, but the forces outside of his power are going to conspire against him. And he also does something bad. He goes and has his son Commodus be the next ruler. You see, those 5 good emperors prior to him, the other 4, none of them had sons. They adopted the ruler behind them to become the next ruler. They picked the best, the most qualified, but he can't go and say no to his son. Turns out Commodus was crazy. He thought he was the incarnation of Hercules. He would dress like him with the lion's pelt over. He would go fight in the Colosseum. Of course, because he's emperor, he couldn't have a fair fight, so he would go and, hamstring his opponents so they could barely walk, or give them a fake sword while he'd have a real sword. He was a terrible, terrible ruler, and just a bad, bad man, that Commodus. And it's the end of the good emperors. So after Commodus, we have many people trying to buy power by paying the army, the Praetorian Guard. One of the things actually happens is one emperor, he goes and says, I'll pay you this much, but he doesn't have it on hand. And then the Praetorian Guard say, okay, yeah, they take over. And then when he doesn't pay, they go auction off to the highest bidder the role of emperor before killing. Septimus Severus is going to wind up having the legions be weaker. He has the barbarian groups to try to give them jobs so that they work with Rome, has them into the army, but he doesn't have them train. He lets their families go with them. Other emperors are going to just say, here's money, go away. We're going to see increases of taxes. and it's just going to get worse and worse. Uh, so look at this. Between 265 to 284, we have at the time called military anarchy. We had 100 people say that they were Roman emperor. 100 people. The 26 of them are actually going to wind up winning the role as emperor, and they ruled for an average of 2 years. And all of them are going to wind up dying violently from this. So we have a terrible time for Rome. One of them, Valarian, he is going to attack the Parthian Empire, trying to bring glory to himself. He winds up being killed and captured, and the Persians stuff him as a trophy through taxidermy. During this time, we're going to have plagues, we're going to have wars, we're going to have taxes go through the roof, we're going to have money becoming less valuable. We're going to have citizens literally trying to stop being Roman citizens because of these taxes. And one of the things that happens because money becomes less valuable because of something called inflation, people are going to go back, instead of using money, just trading their goods for other goods. I think this picture that we see here is a great representation of this time of military anarchy. Just we see them stepping on each other, fighting terribly. We see something going on there. It's just madness and chaos. I wouldn't want to be one of those 100 people who said, I'm going to be Roman emperor. If you look, well, the last guy was murdered by the last guy, and the guy before that murdered by the last guy. It doesn't seem like a job that I would want because I don't want to be murdered. This, of course, would be the picture of the Parthians, going capturing Valarian. He's begging for mercy, and of course, they're going to kill him and then stuff him. And on that note, because this has gone a little bit long, sorry about that, guys. We are going to end our notes for the day. Please press that like, subscribe button to help the channel out. And I hope you guys enjoyed your history lesson on some of these Roman emperors. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.